Hi, everybody. Bill Prince again, and welcome to Chapter 8, where we will be discussing topics related to influencing the political environment, particularly by corporations. In Chapter 8, we will be looking at both the desirability of corporate influence on the political process, as well as the methods used to accomplish those political goals. Be sure to familiarize yourself with the learning objectives from the text and for Week 8. Those learning objectives include understanding the arguments for and against business participation in the political process, knowing the types of corporate political strategies and influences on an organization's development of a particular strategy, assessing the tactics business can use to be involved in the political process, examining the role of the Public Affairs Department and its staff in that process, and recognizing the challenges business face in managing business-government relations in different countries. While the debate may be somewhat moot as business is heavily involved in the political process, it is still important to think about whether this involvement is desirable given the level of influence business has. Business is certainly a player and has a stake in the outcome of government decisions. The million-dollar question is, how big a role should business have in that governmental influence? As noted in the Harris poll, many respondents believe business had too much political power. Historically, labor has been a counterbalance to business influence, but we have seen through legislation, right to work and the like, and along with the perception of many of the relevance of unions, the political power of those organizations have declined, particularly as a counterbalance to business's influence in the political process. Slide 6 sets forth a summary of the pros and cons of political involvement by business. Pros would include the idea that our political system is made up of many parts, and business is one of those parts, and as such, business should have a right to participate just as any other part would. Secondly, that economic stakes for business are high, and third, that business counterbalances other interests in the political process, and that business is a vital stakeholder of government. The cons include arguments such that managers are not qualified to engage in political debate, but really aren't those folks actually well versed in the skill, that business is too big and takes all of the oxygen out of the room when it comes to political discussions, that business is too selfish to care about the common good, and that business risks its credibility by getting involved in controversial political issues such as abortion, labor issues, things of that nature. Business involvement in government generally takes on three forms. There's an information strategy, which includes things like lobbying, wherein information is provided to policymakers about issues important to business. There's financial incentives, where through political action committees and other tools, business is able to provide campaign contributions, fundraisers, and the like to policymakers. And third, constituent building, wherein business and special interests attempt to gather support or opposition amongst their stakeholders to support or oppose issues or policy makers. The primary purpose of political involvement by business is to further the firm's economic survival or growth. Slide 9 provides a graphical depiction of the three strategies discussed above. Lobbying is a direct contact with government officials to influence those officials to take favorable action or not to take negative action towards the firm or entity or industry. While many rules exist to limit the influence of lobbyists, those rules frequently are worked around and abuses can be significant. Direct communication is another method by which business attempts to influence policymakers. Business will often support or sponsor events that bring business and policymakers together. ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, of which we'll watch a video about, is one of those examples of that strategy occurring. Business also can provide expert witness testimony at congressional hearings or regulatory hearings to educate legislatures about the pros and cons of proposed governmental action on society and on business specifically. The Internal Revenue Service Code has allowed the creation of political action committees primarily as a way around fundraising rules that came through the Federal Election Commission. These are created to get around those rules and basically allow entities and organizations to support candidates and issues that they tend to agree with. Originally, political action committees were highly regulated. To this point, however, those regulations have basically become moot and toothless. Today, donors do not have to be disclosed, and the ability to provide funds is basically unchecked. Two important cases out of the Supreme Court, Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission and McCutcheon versus the Federal Election Commission, have basically been judicial endorsements of the ability of businesses, unions, and other groups to infuse as much money into the political process as they choose. They've basically turned the political process into a giant cash machine. Business leaders also have the ability to make contributions on their own. The question becomes, should a firm be able to require its employees to donate to candidates in causes with which they do not agree? I suspect we will see more and more cases about this as more significant business involvement in politics continues to be the trend. Business can also impact the political process by using its power to get things that it wants. Threatening to leave a community unless certain tax concessions are not acquired or required are things of that nature. Spend a little time looking about the potential movement of the company Foxconn into Wisconsin and the many concessions that are being requested there. Another strategy that business employs is what's known as constituency building. This is where business or the special interest groups representing business put together stakeholder coalitions and engage in advertising to put pressure on policymakers. One only needs to spend a few moments watching television, particularly cable news, to see these quotes, information ads, close quotes, where they are asking you to contact a senator or representative about a particular policy or issue. Slide 21 is a depiction of the levels of business political involvement in our system. Spend a little bit of time reviewing those. Major corporations have public affairs departments whose job it is to navigate the corridors of power and get favorable results for their business. Most individual voters do not have public affairs departments that represent them in the halls of power. This can create political cynicism occurring, causing many individual voters to drop out of the system, feeling like their voices are simply not heard and never will be heard. While many may consider our political system as ripe for abuse, it can be worse in other countries, and a company must be aware of their activities abroad so as not to run afoul of laws in those countries dealing with elections, bribery, and things of that nature. All right, well, that's our brief discussion of business involvement in politics, and we will visit with you again in our next chapter.